Hi, my name is Brittany Franklin, and I did my project on sex trafficking, a threat to West Virginia youth. West Virginia has the second largest population of children in the child welfare system per capita. West Virginia has a predominantly white population that is mostly rural. The poverty rate is higher than the national average, and West Virginia was especially impacted by the opioid epidemic. There are approximately 7,265 children in foster care in West Virginia. The Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000 defines trafficking as the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for one of three purposes: labor or services through the use of fraud, force, or coercion for the purposes of subjection to an involuntary servitude, debt bondage, slavery. B, a commercial sex act through use of force, fraud, or coercion. Or C, commercial sex act if the person is under 18 years of age. Sex trafficking of minors does not include the need for there to be evidence of fraud, coercion, or force, as children cannot consent. The breakdown of the definition goes even further into any sexual act for which something of value is given or received. Yvette Young did a TED Talk in 2019 where she stated, "Every child can be a victim of human trafficking. It does not matter their race, their ethnicity, their socioeconomic background, what community they live in, or what school they attend. All our children are at risk for being trafficked." The Assistant United States Attorney for the Northern District of West Virginia stated in a news interview, "It can be your next door neighbor selling their child for sex for a case of beer. That's trafficking." A study of 31 children within the welfare system that were referred for behavioral treatment found that the children that were involved in a trafficking situation had been trafficked by members of their own family. This study also found that there was a higher severity in rural minors. Rural minors are listed as a high-risk group for the potential to be trafficked. Risk factors for a child becoming a victim of child sexual exploitation are listed as poverty, childhood abuse, family disruption, school-related problems, runaways and homelessness, child welfare involvement, low self-esteem, weak family support, those with divorced parents, parents suffering from addiction or single-parent households, and other community factors. "60% of children that the FBI recovers from raids regarding sex trafficking are children from a foster or group home. The estimated average age of the girls entering sex trafficking is age 12. And the average age that law enforcement becomes involved with the girls due to accusations of prostitution is age 14. Children that leave the foster system lack a stable home environment and support. Therefore, they are at a higher risk for being trafficked." Some interventions include a rights-based approach, which is to be considered for combating child sex trafficking. Focus on the child as an individual with their own set of rights and not just on the child as a potential victim. Rights-based approaches work to empower the individual in spite of age, gender, or other sociocultural factors. Focusing on rights to all groups, including these children, would allow victims to move forward with dignity and a sense of empowerment. The Trafficking Victims Protection Act was passed in 2000 by Congress with the description of prosecuting violators, protecting victims, and preventing trafficking. In 2013, the Harvard Law Review goes on to cite that the majority of trafficking cases go unprosecuted. This is largely due to the inability to identify the victims. The Bush administration put the majority of anti-trafficking funds into groups that were geared more towards anti-prostitution and were not directly traffic related. The North Carolina Division of Social Services and the Family and Children's Resource Program notes warning signs of sex trafficking that caregivers or social workers can look out for. These warning signs are identified as excess cash, hotel keys, chronic runaway, homeless youth, lying about their age or obtaining fake IDs, inconsistencies in stories, previously engaged in commercial sex acts, referring to a boyfriend, pimp, or employer as daddy. If any of these warning signs are noted, the article reports that the caregiver should immediately seek out psychological treatment for the child, work to learn as much as they can to educate themselves and the child, as well as be very patient. Children that are currently or have been involved in the welfare system are especially susceptible to victimization, whether a lack of supervision, living in an area with less police presence, attention-seeking behaviors due to patterns of neglect, or having aged out of the system with no support system or home to return to. Children involved in the welfare system are at a heightened risk. These youth need educated and informed regarding trafficking and warning signs to look out for. Their caregivers, social workers involved with them, and teachers that interact with these youth need informed and educated in warning signs and prevention. Youth with a meaningful relationship with an adult they trust are more likely to succeed. Welfare workers are frequently overworked and underpaid. Therefore, they cannot be present at all times to be aware of the problems and potential warning signs of children within their care. In order to make lasting change with sex trafficking in our youth, there needs to be a group effort involving educators, workers, foster parents, and law enforcement. On an outside note, I chose this topic because previously I have worked as a CPS worker and as a juvenile probation officer. I have personally dealt with youth that were involved in sex trafficking situations, and I do know firsthand that none of these situations seem to be handled very well. A particular youth around age 17, we had several reports of her being involved in prostitution or potentially being trafficked. When I contacted that local police force, they admitted that they had known since around the age of 12 that she would frequent, quote, drug houses and would be passed around, and the payment was drugs. The result of this was a 17-year-old with a very severe drug addiction. My questions were, why did no one get arrested? Why did everyone know that a 12-year-old was in a drug house and do nothing? From what I was told, repeat informants would go and state that she had been there and this was a routine for those 5-6 years of her life, and that her family had gotten her involved in this process. And she attempted to get clean a few times and gone to placements, but always ended up back with the same family who had trafficked her. So I imagine that in the future, once she's of age, this is going to lead to lifelong charges and issues for her. There's other cases that we have dealt with where there were repeated reports of particularly a man who seemed to be grooming girls within the area, and he had a particular type, which were girls that were on probation, girls that didn't have a lot of family supervision, or parents that were more lenient, or parents that had drug problems. He would take them in, purchase them cell phones, purchase them hotel rooms, buy them liquor, let them have parties. This escalated into multiple accounts of molestation. Once we reported this, I think I knew of at least 6 girls involved in that. Once we reported this, they couldn't get any family cooperation. None of the families of these girls would cooperate with being interviewed or having their child interviewed. So nothing came of that either. I had a particular interest, obviously, in researching this and seeing if this is actually a problem or if it was just something that I was seeing and it didn't have a basis. I am alarmed at how much of a basis this did have when you read the statistics about 60% of the foster care youth. But I do think there needs to be more awareness and more education on this matter, because both of these instances that I've just described, nothing came of it, which is extremely disappointing. Thank you.